We're glad you're interested in the Retro Adventurers. Please note that episode 1 has some audio issues which we ironed out in future episodes. We hope you enjoy and subscribe for more.
Welcome to the Retro Adventurers. This is a brand new podcast. We're on episode 1. We're drawn together by a love of old text adventures and old systems. Each month we'll bring together a group of adventurers, Mission Impossible style, and take a dive into the world of old text games and the systems that you can play them on. Some of the adventurers might come back every time. Others might only appear on high days and holidays or whenever they happen to fancy it. I'm Ben Collier. I'm a BBC Micro and Spectrum Next enthusiast. And with me today are two intrepid text adventurers, Jason Compton and Dave Hawkins. Jason has been adventuring since he got a Commodore 64 for his 8th birthday. He's the author of Ghost King, the Scott Adams-style text adventure based on Hamlet. He was a regular contributor to the computer magazines CU Amiga, Amiga Computing, and Commodore World, and was the editor of pioneering online publication Amiga Report. Today, he dreams up impractical text adventure prequels, sequels, and pastiches, and can be found on the Puny Informed Discord. Jason, what have you been up to recently? I understand that you did a lot of work on the Osmu interpreter. There's just been a new release of that. Was it in November? Are you still involved?
I'm still on the periphery of the work that Frederick does on Osmu and Puny Inform, which is kind of the companion piece that helps advance more 8-bit retro adventures. So most of what I've been up to is listening to you read that lovely bio that I wrote for you, and I will be trimming down for you next time. But really appreciate you putting together this podcast and getting through the whole bio.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Dave Hawkins is also with us. He's been involved in adventure gaming since the early days. He played his first text adventure, Planet of Death, back in 1981, and he hasn't really stopped since. As well as playing games, he's the author of 2 adventures for the ZX Spectrum, Wizard's Warrior and Stranded. More recently, he returned to the adventure development world with 3 adventures for PC, The Eye of Borak, Tangled Tales, and Stranded 2, a long overdue sequel to the ZX Spectrum original. Dave, how's it going? Are you feeling better? I know you've been under the weather. We've been a bit hit by a bit of the old COVID.
Well, we have, yeah. I'm feeling a lot better, thank you, Ben. It was a bit up and down for a couple of days, but I'm here and very glad to be here.
Fantastic. Now I know that you didn't just build text adventures. You built all sorts of things, and the one that really stood out to me was the game that was a bit like Rockstar Ate My Hamster. What was that? Which one was that?
Oh, Star Maker, yeah. I mean, that was probably, I think it's about 1984, 85. And it was sort of a family project, really. My sisters were involved in that one, and they were probably the inspiration for it.
And Jason, I don't know whether this is something that's completely alien to you. Do you have Rockstar Ate My Hamster in the on the other side of the Atlantic?
By way of pirating it, yes, I love that
Amazing.
game, but I don't think it was ever sold legitimately here. But it was definitely a game that
It
I
strikes
found.
me as the sort of thing that would get sued out of existence over there. My only memory of it was a kind of with the names of the rock stars being changed to things that were like grossly offensive versions of their
Yes.
names, like Salt and Pepper being turned into Scratch and Sniffer.
Iggy Car Rust and
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I can't remember half the rest of them. Anyway, welcome both of you. We are a team, and over time, I'm hoping that more people join our team, and we become a bit of a collective, and swap people in and out as we go. So the way the show is going to work, it's like this. So first off, each time round, we're going to have a look at your letters and a bit of news from retro computing and adventuring, and then we're going to dive into a couple of old adventures. The first one we're going to call the appetizer. So that's like a little amuse-bouche of a game. When the first text adventures came out, a lot of them were quite small. and it's a shame to miss out on those. And some of them are really quirky and interesting. So we fancy having a go at a few of those. So what's that mean? The amusement, a mouth amusement. So just get us started with a mouth amusement of a game. So we're going to do that first, and then we'll move on to a headline act. So we really want to touch on some of the classics, maybe not the big, well-known American ones, often British, European games, but some American ones, but retro ones. Nothing modern. We really like the old school stuff. So we'll discuss that game in kind of broad terms, and then we'll hit something that I've chosen in a completely original and non-plagiarizing fashion to call the spoiler wall. Now, guys, you've not heard of anyone using a term like that before, right?
No
It's new
grooves
to
were
me.
eaten in the
No,
adaptation of
no,
that
no,
name.
nothing like that. No, absolutely. So this is us. We've done it in a clean room. I went into a clean room, and I came up with this idea of the spoiler wall entirely on my own. So, right. So once we've driven through the spoiler wall, we'll have a chance to discuss solutions to problems in the game, in the non-appetite, in the main course game. Um, so anyway, we put our heads together before this podcast and decided to look at a couple of games. Our appetizer today is, and this is Jason's nomination, was Around the World. I think it is just Around the World, isn't it? Not Around the World in 80 Days.
The name kind of bounces around depending on whether you're looking at the advertising in Softside magazine or on the game itself. Yeah, the splash screen, such as it is, just
Yeah.
says around the world.
Yeah, yeah. And then we've got the headline act. So we're going with The Pawn by Magnetic Scrolls. And I know a lot of people are really interested in hearing about that. So I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. So
Mm.
anyway, before we get to that, let's have a look at the mailbag. Well, obviously it's empty, but we do want your communications. If you're listening today and you're thinking, "Oh, I hate what he just said," please send in anything you like. If you want to send us a poison pen letter, that's great. If you want to send us praise, Bitcoin, wallet keys, marriage proposals, whatever you like, all of that would be good. We're on facebook.com/. Retro Adventurers. You can find us there. Send us your messages on there. Or I guess we'll come up with an email at some point, but maybe not for now. Anyhow, as we don't have any letters, let's move on to news. Jason, I think you've got a couple of things, haven't you?
Yeah, the first news item that we teed up here was a lost game in the Synapse BTZ series, which came out in the mid 80s. The games that were released were Mind Wheel, Essex, Brimstone, and Breakers, but many people, including myself, were completely unaware that there's at least one other game that was in progress that was never released by Synapse, and that was Ronin. And there's quite a bit of research out there now, including a apparently complete archival copy of the work in progress for Atari 8-bit platforms. It's got the 1984 Synapse date. William Mataga credited as a programmer. David Alzafan, the author. There's interviews with David as well that explains the development of the game and its ultimate cancellation. And I'm hoping that we will be able to talk about these BTZ games having come as they did after that first Infocom wave had already started to crest a little bit, and we'll talk about how Magnetic Scrolls approached the market, how
Yeah.
other companies did, and Synapse took what I would say was maybe a more serious approach to trying to get in on that wave, and you can see that with the games that were released, and I think maybe after we talk about one or two of the games, we can go back to Ronin and whether or not it would have fit in with what they were doing, but a great piece of archaeology that clearly was a group effort. So we encourage you to follow the link in the show notes and learn all about the
Yeah.
Ronin.
Yeah.
And from the more contemporary development side, my good dear friend Stefan Vogt, who produces retro style games and then releases them on dozens and dozens and dozens of platforms. If you are looking for a ready to play Dreamcast CDI of a new game, Stefan is your guy. Well, his Moonmist Entertainment label and he have released what he assures you is going to be an award-winning interactive horror, The Ghosts of Blackwood Manor. You'll take on the role of novelist Thomas King and his wife Cora as they move into a remote Scottish manor house just days before Christmas 1986. There's your retro cred.
Uh-huh.
Seeking
Uh-huh.
inspiration for his next book, Thomas begins to explore the history of Blackwood Manor, only to discover a dark secret that dates back centuries to the days of the great Scottish witch hunts. Like many
Fantastic.
of Stefan's recent games, it's developed in Punion form, which is the new 8-bit friendly library for the venerable Inform 6 programming language. You can learn all about it at 8bitgames.itch.io, or really honestly, just raise your hand and say you're interested in Stefan's games, and he will come over to your house with a 6-pack and tell you all about how great they are.
So I think it's an interesting one, this, isn't it? Because when we were talking about the vision for this podcast, we talked about how we wanted to focus on old school games, and I think we sort of said, well, if something is old school in spirit, then we cover it, right? So I think this is an example of something that's possibly absolutely in there. It's got its old school cred, and we should probably be taking a look at it at some point. Um, but it's a fascinating question because obviously there are things that are modern that are old school in nature, but then there's obviously the IF crowd and lots of very, very fancy modern stuff that we're probably trying to shy away from a little bit.
And I think one of the important things about Stefan's games, and I will admit I don't know them that well. I mean, it's just the sheer number of platforms that he manages to target with them.
It's incredible. So what's his do you know any idea what's the kind of the code base he's using to what's he targeting? You said I think you mentioned it was Punion form, right?
Yes, yeah, he develops in Punion form, which means that he's outputting rather small Z machine,
Yeah.
either version 3 or version 5 binaries. And basically, he and some others have developed a script that goes through and just, has all of the interpreters for,
Yeah.
basically every platform that's ever had them, which is a lot. And you feed the Z3 or Z5 binary into it, and it spits out, kind of ready to play disk images for all of these. So I tease, but I'm being serious. Like
Yeah.
he'll tell you about like, wow, it's on 37 platforms, and I'm like, Stefan, how many people are downloading your Dreamcast version? Yeah, but it's there. So
It's amazing. No, I've used Punion before myself. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely thing. And the ability to kind of spit out something for the program it on your Mac and spit it out onto the BBC. It's just beautiful. So I'm very, very happy about that. That's fantastic, and I'll look forward to having a go at that game. Lovely. So in terms of other bits and pieces, the Z machine interpreter for a whole bunch of different platforms that code, the source code for that, has appeared recently in a GitHub repository owned by Andrew Plotkin. So Andrew Plotkin, in a weird way, he's almost he's very much a modern text adventure guy, being involved in Inform 7 and Inform 6, I think, as well, and has and well he's found this stuff, so he's made that available online. It's fascinating, and if you're a coder or a bit of a geek and you fancy understanding how all of that stuff was put together, then taking a look at that source code, again we'll put a link to that in the show notes, is really, really worth a look. The only other item that we had in the news for today, I've added this because it's just fascinating, and I'm sure both of you, Jason, Dave, you're gonna know about this already. I didn't. I was looking up information about the porn and magnetic scrolls prior to the podcast, and I discovered this magazine online, The Classic Adventurer. Is that something you're both familiar with?
Oh, I'm very aware of that. I've actually there's actually a review of Biobark in one of the last issues he published.
Well, it's brilliant. There's a fantastic interview in one of those with Anita Sinclair, who was obviously, I think, the chairperson, possibly, but definitely heavily involved with magnetic scrolls. A
Mm.
really good interview there that covers all sorts of stuff, and we'll get round to that later in the episode. So we're on to the appetizer. So the appetizer for today, as I said earlier, was around the world. So guys, because first off, what did we all play this on? What were you using? Dave, you're on Windows machine, right?
I'm a Windows machine. I actually played it on Apple Win, which is an Apple II emulator. And I actually felt that I got a fairly good experience, as if I'd actually played it on the original hardware.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you and I, Jason, were probably eventually on kegs. Wasn't on kegs to begin with. I think you had basically suggested that we should all be doing it, or you and I should both be doing it on kegs. And I'd
I'd recommend it
completely.
kegs. I actually ended up on Apple Win as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I started on something called Atari 800 Mac X, which was I mean it's probably a perfectly good piece of software, but I couldn't the PO files we were using for this, it just it didn't understand them at all or didn't seem to. So I struggled with that for about an hour and eventually gave up and used kegs, which was great. So no, that was interesting. So but you obviously you have good memories of this from the past, right?
I have, yeah, I had some memories of it because this was, and I appreciate you two allowing us to do this as the first short game here. This was, as far as I can recall, the very first text adventure that I ever touched, encountered. I must have been no older than 7,
Yeah.
and it was at
Wow.
some computer class in a in a community lab. It was Apple IIe's probably, and yeah, this was one of the titles that we were introduced to, and it was one of these games where I'd played it for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, but it had always kicked around in my head as kind of this really influential thing. So fast forward some number of years, and you're finally able to research these things on the internet. But the problem is that when you remember something that's based on Around the World in 80 Days, for a while you just get a lot of hits of the novel, and then in more recent years you get a lot of hits on the more high profile adventure game 80 Days. So it's still kind of a little hidden away artifact from 1981.
Dave, you presumably you had no knowledge of this previously, or did you?
No, no, it's actually the first time I'd ever heard of it. And it, uh, basically, because I mean, you'll probably appreciate this, Ben. I mean, the idea of Apple IIs in the UK was just well out of most people's price bracket, but it
Yeah,
seems to be a very common machine in the US. And I think that a lot of games that we didn't get, and I think we'll probably catch on this in later episodes, that there's a lot of stuff that the UK had that the US doesn't have.
yeah,
And I think this is sort of one of those good examples of how there are certain things that gained notoriety in certain countries that are completely missed in other areas.
yeah. It's interesting. I mean, this is an Atari. I think I think we all used it. Did we say we were all using it on the Atari emulator? In Atari format. We're not doing an Apple II, the Apple II version of this, right? No one
No,
did the
we
Apple II.
David and I both played the Apple version.
Oh, you both
We
the
played the
Apple
Apple
version.
version.
Sorry, I'm going slightly bonkers. The so it's that's interesting. I mean, a friend of mine, I had some exposure to the Atari computers. I think they were a little bit more popular in the UK than the Apples, just
The
because of the
400 and the 800.
yeah, that's right. And a friend of mine, his dad was an auctioneer, and one day just brought back it obviously hadn't sold brought back this Atari 800 with some Star Raiders and a whole load of cassettes on it, and we just spent weeks playing all these random games. And I think one of my first adventures was a random text adventure from a magazine tape of some sort on the Atari 800. But Dave, what was your first adventure game?
I've thought of this long and hard. I think it was probably Planet of Death, and I played it on the
Oh yes, I think
ZX81.
we said that, didn't we, earlier on in the intro?
I
Yeah,
think we did, yeah, yeah, we
yeah.
mentioned it earlier on.
I was
Um,
Twin Kingdom Valley. That was my on the C64. That was my first one.
I played that on the BBC. It was the first time I played it. I played it at school on the BBC Micro.
I think the C64 they decided to make use of the C64's hardware sprites. So when you got the vector drawing of the at the very start of the game, where you have this vector drawing of the hut, on the C64 version you get a sprite of a rabbit bouncing down the path, and that's the only difference between the two versions. So so
I
yeah,
think
it
because
go on.
so
Sorry.
I was gonna say that because that's quite funny you say that because Bug Bite used a very similar system of developing on on one kind of main machine. I think they were using NASCOMs or something very similar to that, and then porting over. So I think you'll probably find that a lot of the actual games were created sort of as a global game, and then tweaked for the individual systems.
Interesting. Very interesting. Hmm. So that's another one I want to put on the list for later. Is Twinkling Valley. I'd like to revisit that at some point. It's interesting. I mean, around the world, I mean, there have obviously been millions of games written with this kind of with this theme. There was one that I played a couple of Christmases ago, which was this sort of steampunk remake. I don't know if anyone had come across that, but that's was it's really strange. It was an adventure, but point and click basically with a
Mm.
narrative, almost like a branching story.
That might be
Um,
80 days that
is that
you're
80
referring to.
days?
Yeah.
Possibly. Where you kind of end up on some steamship above the Atlantic and go to the North Pole and all sorts of stuff. Um, yeah, it was quite good fun. So yeah, in terms of so I guess what first impressions, Dave? 80 days.
First impressions.
What-
Um, the first impression actually was just a massive nostalgic dive into. I remember how games used to look like this. um, Second impression was um, how simple the command structure was compared to the
Yeah,
games that you got used to later on, and how much the games had developed. Um, Overall, I thought it was a lovely introduction to text adventuring. And had I played this when I was 12 or 13, I think I'd have been overwhelmed with it. Um,
do you think you would have even made it into the balloon?
um, I mean, this time around, I finished it in about 4 to 5 hours. But in retrospect, yeah, I mean, had I been playing when I was 13, no, I'm not sure I would have made it into the balloon. I've got to say there was some complexities there, and there were some struggles with vocabulary, which I think we all know that's part of text
Yeah,
adventuring.
yeah. I mean, it was particularly bad in this. It really had some charm, and I really liked the way that the dialogue was written. Um, but I just found myself in this endless case of hunt the verb, trying to find all sorts. I mean, at one point I think I did investigate balloon to try and do some sort of
Yes,
examination on the balloon, and because of the way the parser worked, if you typed investigate balloon, it would actually give you your inventory because it
yes.
took the first, I think maybe what?
Three. It only takes the
I
first
think
three
it's three
characters.
letters.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fairly common at the time.
yeah. That's right. Yeah. So and you the other one that caught me out, and well, I figured it out eventually, was the fact that it would your inventory, for instance, or the system would give you the name of something, so magnifying glass, for example, but you couldn't pick up a magnifying glass. You could only pick up a glass,
Yes,
and that was enormously frustrating. Um, yeah, likewise, enter train station didn't work, but enter station works. So it was
yes,
just a
and there
bit
was
kind
a
of
lot of go to
yeah,
go
Yeah.
balloon go, which I think again is very common at the time, and I know that certainly a lot of the Scott Adams games are very much like that, very verb noun, and it's not always that obvious what the intent is.
yeah, yeah. Um, Jason, I mean, you've played. I mean, this is a blast from the past, right? Did you recognize much of what you saw?
I mean, I recognize the thing that I always remembered, which was the very first puzzle involving the woman and the puzzle
Yeah,
and the puddle, because that was the thing, that was the image that stuck in my head. Like, what is this
yeah,
game? I know that
yeah.
there was this woman and a puddle, and you have to get around that. Um, and to pull back the veil on this, I'll tell the audience, when we were roughing out the concept for this program, we had discussed, like, well, when we do especially these deep dives into these more obscure games, we're not just going to trash them the whole time.
Yeah,
So, what
yeah,
I want to say is that I actually think this is overall a very good example of one of those, late 70s, early 80s, ultra minimal 2-word parser type games. And I say that particularly because although I hear you two talking about your frustrations with the with the parser and hunt the word, the reality is that although sometimes the verb synonyms aren't supported, or noun synonyms aren't supported that we would like, you can get through the game with a very small number of verbs, and none of them are crazy obscure.
Yeah.
Like
I
there's
would agree with that. Yeah.
on the other end of the spectrum, there's a Scott Adams game that requires you to think of using the verb hyperventilate. And like there's no hint in the rules you can do that. You
I
just
mean,
need to figure it out.
yeah,
Like this, you can get through this game with get, drop, I think use,
yeah,
go, ride, and move, or something like, or
and
turn.
cook.
Like that, yes.
Yes,
The-
and good.
the-
Yeah.
But pretty much, there's nothing that like really goes too far
yeah,
into the realm of like
yeah,
I've got to think of a way to express this. I get it when we're used to having deeper vocabularies, we can be frustrated, but the mechanics of it aren't way off the wall. What I will say is that it's a good example up until about halfway through when clearly the guy runs out of time and stops writing puzzles, and it's basically just move to a place, go into a conveyance, move to another location, go into a conveyance.
yeah.
Like we can see the seams where it falls apart. But for the first half of it or so, like this is a good example of, and this was from a monthly series of games where for what at the time was a fairly nominal fee given the price of software in the US in circa 1981, which was really quite high. You were going to get a text adventure on a monthly basis. It wasn't going to break the bank, and you could get some playtime value out of it. So in that,
And
I think it succeeded.
and in terms of, I mean, the funny thing is, talking about how much you could do with that two-word parser. I mean, it stands up by comparison to our next game, the Pawn. It stands up pretty well because, I mean, you don't find yourself concocting like 5-word incantations that give you the right the right output, you know.
Absolutely.
So yes, and I mean, I came back to that earlier. It's charming. This is a charming game. This is, we were talking about having something that you like about this. I found it charming. The way it was written, the language, some of the you could really see the personality of the person who wrote this coming through. Um, so I guess the next question really would be, in terms of puzzles, and we said before, didn't we? We said on this on our appetizer game, we might give away a few little bits and bobs because it's not the end of the world. But we're going to be light on the spoilers, but we may let a few through. In terms of what was your, I don't know, Dave? What was your um, most frustrating puzzle you came across?
Well, the one that really stands out was having to adjust the time on the clock to turn clock, and I will admit I cheated and had to look it up online.
Do you know what?
I was,
You mentioned that before. When we were chatting before the show, you mentioned that was the thing. That didn't phase me. I didn't have a problem with that. But I
oh,
can
that's
understand.
interesting.
But the thing that killed me was the thing before that. I had to use a walkthrough to get it, which was the blooming pelican. And genuinely, I knew what I was trying to do. It was obvious what you had to do, right? And with that one, it was just the order you had to do it in.
It's
And
funny you should say that because I actually didn't have any problems with that at all. I think I sailed through that bit.
yeah,
It
it's
is
great.
interesting, I mean,
Yeah.
how people approach puzzles from different angles.
Totally. It was. I mean, with the clock one, it was just really obvious. Even if the things that you were given there. I'm trying to avoid giving kind of
Of
obviously.
course, yeah.
And we've got some stuff that we've obviously given away here, but I'm trying to avoid giving too much away. But with both of those puzzles, in one case, you've got a very obvious thing you have to do, but you have to do stuff in a certain order for it to recognize that you're trying to do it. And the other one, you've got something that's very obviously sat there. It's like, well, you're going to use this thing. It's there for a reason. What am I going to use it on? And then, well, what have I just been? Yeah. So it's really interesting. Um, the one thing I did find, I don't know if either of you came across this, Jason, that perhaps the fact that you could use a verb and you would be told, I can't do this right now.
Yes. I think that was quite a
Yes.
common response for text adventures, though, wasn't it? When you had limited amount of memory,
Yeah,
there were only so many things you could do, and it was almost a way of trying to hide the fact that it had limited vocabulary.
yeah.
And in the convention of these types of games, it often means, okay, I just haven't done something that's a prerequisite. And sometimes it
Yeah.
does mean that, and other times it's you're kind of getting a red herring.
Yeah,
Um,
it
Exactly.
definitely caught me out that a couple of times. It's like I can't do this, whatever the verb might be. I don't want to give it
Yeah.
away. I can't do this right now. It's like, okay, right, I'll do it later. But actually, I was able to do that if I had just done something else, the prerequisite, right? Yeah, and
Absolutely.
it blew my mind a bit. But no, it was really genuinely enjoyable. And a good laugh. And there were some
I mean,
very funny bits and pieces in there. We we had the gentleman who was apparently found himself in difficult circumstances, but somehow owned a yacht.
yes.
that
Yes, I wondered about
that for want of a meal is not available. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
the
I
thing
mean,
that
I
the thing that I wanted to say about the puzzle design is that so that we didn't specifically say this. The premise of the game is that you are trying to replicate the around the world in 80 days feat, and you are
yes,
challenged
yes, yes,
start from this gentleman's club and make it back to your club in London within 80 days. And so you've got actually a little bit of a built-in scoring system. There is a different ending, for lack of a better term, for whether or not you manage that feat. So you could get a little extra playtime out of optimizing your path through the game if you were so inclined. But some of the puzzles in the game are tied to the train won't leave for 14 hours, the repairs will take 5 days,
that.
and the
Absolutely.
game
yeah.
offers us a wait command which will eat up a 1 or 2 days. It actually varied depending, I think, on where you were, but that doesn't matter. So all you're doing is you're burning up time,
Mm.
and what the author is essentially saying is you have to go solve a puzzle, which we know that. But if that's the case, why did you base it on a time thing to resolve? So I thought that was not great logic. That felt like something that maybe if the author had a friendly voice, sitting beside him as he was writing it, they said, maybe don't base it on time if the wait command never helps you and the passage of time never gets past this puzzle. So that was
D-
sloppy.
does in terms of the wait command? I didn't use that at all. In terms of the wait command, is that something where if I, for example, when I was waiting 14 hours for a particular thing to leave, if I had said wait, or whatever, I would have been able to just get on board, would I?
No, it
Oh,
would
it just
still
doesn't
say that
work.
it's going to wait for 14 hours. That's why I'm
Oh,
saying it
oh,
was
that's a
It
was
just
complete
sloppy
passed
in
missed
there.
time.
opportunity, isn't it? Missed
Yeah.
opportunity. Hmm.
I mean, there is something actually towards the end of the game, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, and it almost may have been a bug. There is a point when you can be jailed, and you just have to wait to get out of jail. Um, and the cause of your jailing involves trying to cross a sign with a certain object. But the object actually doesn't actually have to be with you and could be in a completely different location. And I really struggled with that, and then it suddenly worked, and I, to honestly, don't know why.
Yeah.
We'll have to
Yeah.
talk about that one on the other side then, if you don't want to spoil it now, because
Yeah.
I'm not sure what
Well,
that one is.
possibly. So, yeah. So, just in terms of, I guess we have to kind of come to some sort of conclusion here on our appetizer. I thought it was a very tasty appetizer. The thing for me, I've said it already. I thought it was charming and well written, but obviously suffered from the same thing that a lot of those games and of that era did. But in terms of a novel idea, I thought it was great. Others?
I felt it was a very good interpretation of the book, given the limited scope of the program at the time. But there is one thing that kind of stood out for me, and I think there were a number of puzzles that we now look on to be socially unacceptable in the way they were.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes. Fair enough. I think
That
that.
said, I thought it was a really good example of a game at the time, and I actually thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. good stuff. Yeah, I think I know exactly the puzzle you're referring to, and
Yeah,
yeah, that's fair enough. It to be honest, yeah, it's like something from a film from the 1950s, isn't it? But
it was exactly like that.
yeah, fair enough. But yeah, it was really enjoyable, and Jason, thanks ever so much for recommending it. It was a
Yes, absolutely. I'm
brilliant
glad to have
starter.
experienced it.
Appreciate the tour through the past.
Right, so on to the main course. So this month we have the Pawn. Um, First off, guys, who read the Tale of Korovnia?
I did.
You read it. You read it. How
I
did
did.
you enjoy the Tale of Korovnia?
It was fine. um, when we're going to have novellas some more as we go through our
Yeah.
games here, and I do think that the feelies, the included stories, that they are an important part. They're important enough that the publishers, the developers, paid to have them written, paid to include them, and we should look at them now. How much that benefited me and enhanced my life, that's up for discussion. In some ways it tonally set some expectations, and in others it didn't exactly. But I'll be faithfully reading them as long as they keep churning them out.
I definitely I do feel like the Tale of Korovnia it did add color to the adventure for me. Um, it felt a little bit. You said there, they paid to have them written. I'm not convinced they paid to have that written. That feels like it was. I I'm not going to speculate on. I'm not going to be uncharitable and speculate on how that was written. But yeah, I mean, it did say it even had. I noticed there were bits of dialogue in there that felt like they were kind of repeated or had been edited into two positions, or they'd moved it around and they assumed that they hadn't said something in the story before so it felt quite disjointed and weird to me. But it was very interesting. There were a lot of references. I don't know whether there were things which I just got because they were very much a kind of 1980s reference. There was a reference to a helicopter pilot, someone's uh, possible paramour being was it Malcolm was a helicopter pilot, and I'm pretty certain that's a reference to Prince Andrew. I
Ugh.
I don't know. Yeah, I and then yeah, and some of the humor in there was pretty. I don't know. How would you describe it, Dave?
Um, Odd.
Yeah, it felt like to me. It felt like there was a. I don't know. It felt like there were quite a few, for want of a better word, dick jokes in there.
To be honest, I think the actual story was written by one of the coders.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me. I think but yeah, I mean, it was full of. I mean, we had Eric's father was called Willie, um,
Yeah,
and there was some things in. I'm not even going to mention the one about the little people and their farming product, but that one was a bit. I don't know whether that was a. I'm not quite sure what that was a reference to, whether it was intended to be what it came out as, but it
I
certainly
think it
seemed.
was.
I mean, does anyone have any idea who Gringo Bacon Burger was supposed to be? It doesn't. It sounded like it was like a play on someone's name.
Well, I wasn't sure that it wasn't like a, a combination. They hadn't actually just tried to take various names, but it was definitely was an old one.
If it's funny, it struck me exactly the same way that one of those names from Rockstar 8 My Hamster would have done. It felt
Mm.
like Gringo Bacon Burger would be. If you took like the word gringo and the word bacon and the word burger and
If you
swapped them
sort of
slightly, it would be.
conjugated them, yeah.
Yeah, it was like it was some other person's name, but goodness knows, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it's entirely possible it was one of the development team. That seems to happen a lot, particularly the ages it happened to.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. So one thing that again in researching this, one thing that did come up, and I think this is possibly responsible for a lot of the humor in here. I was reading it and thinking, when did Pratchett first come out? When did Terry Pratchett first come
Yeah.
out? And I had a look, went onto Wikipedia, and The Color of Magic, Terry Pratchett's first book, came out in 1983,
Oh, there you go then. Yep.
and The Pawn was 84.
Yep.
Mm.
And
Well, to be honest, I actually felt there was more overall in the porn. I feel it was more Douglas Adams style.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, off the back of that, I then Googled Pratchett Magnetic Scrolls, which took me, and that was how I discovered the Classic Adventurer magazine. And it was the team talking about another game, Fish, and
Mm.
talking about how Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams had influenced Fish. So I'm pretty certain that both Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett had an influence on this.
I'd agree
Um,
with that.
yeah, and that explains a lot about. To me, that explains a lot about the kind of postmodern kind of feel of it. It wasn't what I expected at all. I think Jason, you said something a bit like this to me before the show. The tone was not what I was expecting in the slightest.
Yeah, and when I saw the name Gringo Bacon Burger in the story, I'm like, all right, so we're gonna be in this kind of world, all right. Which the cover art and box description and things of the pawn don't set you up for. But
Mm,
then, and neither do the first few encounters in the world.
not at all. Not at
But
all.
when you see that, all right, we're doing Gringo Bacon Burgers, so this we're yeah, and I think that I think in general, it would be tough to be a genre writer of any sort, whether it's interactive fiction or straight fiction or whatever, and not either be aware of and pushing back against the influences of Adams and Pratchett. If you're
Mm,
writing something in '84 in a genre vein,
yeah, yeah,
either riding the tide or doing your own spin, or saying no, I will have none of this foolishness. I'm going to do it the serious way.
yeah.
Uh,
It was just like you say. It was the box art that caught me out because you look at the box art and you think, okay, serious fantasy. I'm gonna go into this and it's gonna be a real kind of, what, just trying to think, but yeah, full on serious. Get what you expect, genre stuff. But
And even
yeah,
the origin story of the name, where it's this idea of, well, you're this character dropped into
yeah,
these unfamiliar circumstances, you're at a disadvantage, so you are being used as a pawn. Like
yes,
that,
yeah, yeah,
that
Mm.
feels that feels darker and more serious
yeah.
than what
Yeah,
some of what
100%.
unfolds
It's
is.
absolutely the impression that I got going into this. And I mean, my it just I guess I ought to say I was gonna say, I've got this on the show notes, like my kind of script here. Had either of you played this game before? Dave, had you played this before at all?
I had. I mean, I played it back in the late '80s when it kind of first came out, and it was one of those games. I mean, so I'm not overly surprised when you guys say you thought it was going to be more serious. I kind of knew the kind of humour they were aiming for, um, but I mean, I've got different sort of memories of the game, and it was at a time when I was developing games as well, so I was looking up to this as what really was becoming state of the art at the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the thing I mean my first 16-bit adventure was Thief, or Guild of Thieves rather. Sorry.
I haven't
Um,
played that yet.
So I mean that's got to be on the menu later in the
Oh, absolutely.
later in the podcast's long run of 1,000 episodes. But I mean with that one was I mean I just remember playing that and being blown away by the graphics because I wasn't used to an adventure with anything like the pictures that
To be
obviously are
honest,
in
the porn
this.
struck me that way as well. I mean,
Yeah,
the graphics were really
yeah.
they were outstanding at the time.
Yeah, and the silly thing is, I mean, I played this on a ZX Spectrum Next. I've got this wonderful collection here, the Magnetic Scrolls compilation,
I've
um,
heard of that. Yeah,
put together by Strand Games, I think it is.
it is.
And
Yeah.
they did a kind of a round robin, and they've sent out the box art. So they've sent out all the bits, and they've sent this lovely map here of for another game, and it comes on an SD card with a little sticker you can stick on the SD card with the logo of Magnetic Scrolls on it. It's a really beautiful product.
It's got
Um,
physical content.
oh yeah, absolutely physical but this yeah the physical content here I think is actually yeah I mean this is actually something that comes to do with this is to do with a totally different game. Actually, they sent free, but you do get the box art. You get the physical, a physical box that you can put it in, which
Oh, that's
has
lovely.
a lovely picture of all of the games. It comes with the Pawn, Guild of Thieves, Jinxter, Corruption, Fish, Myth, and Wonderland. And yeah, pictures of it all on the back, and it's a you just slide it in with the other games you've got for the machine. But the irony, of course, is that because it's going on to the even with it being the Spectrum Next, which I don't, if you're an American listening to this, you might not be familiar with this, but a team of people, including the original the original case designer for the Spectrum, got together and they built an FPGA-based iteration on the Spectrum, the ZX Spectrum. But even with this being an iteration, the graphics are actually at a lower res than the Atari and Amiga versions of this game. So it's like a back port almost.
Mm.
So the graphics aren't as good. So I guess both of you, did you use Amiga, Atari? What was your platform of choice?
Well, I used again an emulator, and I used the Atari ST version,
Yeah,
which is I chose that because that's how I originally played it.
yeah,
So what I really wanted to do was try and capture the feel I had when I
yeah,
first played the game,
yeah.
and I think I did that, and I actually first impressions were pretty similar. Really, I wasn't quite so blown away with the graphics because times change. Um, the actual game itself, I thought flowed fairly well. But I'd like to hear Jason's opinion because I kind of want to go on a bit more in depth about the game, but I don't want to
Yeah,
just
yeah.
continue to talk. So
Yeah.
Jason, what was your what was your platform that you played this on?
I use the Magnetic Scrolls Memorial site at iflegends.org. It's
Ah,
if-legends.org, and that has a pretty nice interface. You can save games sort of in the browser session and also download them. It does have I think you can toggle between what I'm guessing is the Amiga and ST art. So
oh
pick your
really? Oh, so
pick
it's a
your
completely it's not an emulation of a particular platform. It's a
of
it's
course,
a
platform emulator.
huh.
yeah,
That's interesting.
whatever the interpreter in the background is, but
Yeah,
yeah, it lets you cycle through that, and yeah, so that for me that it was I wasn't worried about recreating the experience because I had never played the game before, even though I was well aware of it. It was the kind of thing that I would have thought about getting however many dozens of times and just never did. And I've certainly heard people sing the praises of Magnetic Scrolls, and I just never sat down to do it. And I used to feel bad about that decision, and I don't feel quite so bad about that decision anymore.
here we go.
I
It's
Ah,
to
interesting. This is we're all going to start getting a little bit controversial here now.
But yeah, I did want to loop back to we were talking about the release dates and the graphics.
Yeah,
I was intrigued by the fact that when it first came out on the Sinclair QL, that it was text only. The graphics were actually a thing that spruced up
I did
the
not
later
know that.
releases. Yeah, when
I
they
didn't know
ported to
that.
other platforms. Yeah, this was like one of the big Sinclair branded highlighted games for the QL, but that was text only. And the fact that some of the game felt that it had pretty constrained prose, at first I'm like, okay, they're saving room for the graphic, but that wouldn't have been the case in the initial draft. So that might have been more
It's
just about
fascinating.
storage or memory on the
So this must
QL.
have come out on micro drive to begin with, right?
Apparently, yeah, you can see if you dig around, you can see the binder where it came
That's probably
on
what
those
the
weird.
constraint was, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but
th-
Um,
the storage.
yeah,
but there were a few places where I get a bigger chunk of text, but others where I'm like, okay, I felt like for lack of a better term, I felt like the author may have been just like, well, I'm on a hard word count, so can't go any further.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and yeah, the fact that not every location had a unique illustration
yeah,
that threw me a little bit. I feel like being, and I know it's not the only game series that does this, but I do overall prefer, like, unless we're talking about like actually identical locations, I think it pulls me out a little bit if I'm not seeing something unique for each location. Either describe it and let me use my imagination, or give me something unique for each one. I was a little little challenged
Yeah,
by
I mean,
having
it's
some.
interesting. I mean, going back to the kind of the Twin Kingdom Valley style games that had graphics back in the day, a lot of those used, they'd use vectors. So they'd say, I've got this vector of a tree, and I can make it slightly larger and slightly smaller, and they
Mm.
would compose a lot of the images from, they'd say, right, just put 20 trees over here and a hill, which is just a line, and then fill that in with some color. And they would use that to produce quite a lot of images. I would be almost willing to bet that Twin Kingdom Valley has more pictures in it than this. Um, and I guess most games were like that. But in terms of, but even that, even back then, there were still a lot of locations in that game that didn't have, if they didn't have an image for every single location. You'd be in the woods. Here is a woods picture. You'd move forward 3 times and it wouldn't change. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, so I think maybe it was just the fact that that was an accepted thing at the time. This idea that you didn't get a picture for every location. Um,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would certainly, looking back in retrospect, I wouldn't have expected to have found a picture for every location. They were more, um, pictures were pretty much there to say you've made progress.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
see the American tradition of like Sierra Illustrated Adventures, the handful that Interplay put out, Tracer Sanction, Mind Shadow, Borrow Time, Task Times, things like that. Unless it's a unless it's like you're on an endless plane, the plane continues endlessly. You typically get a new image, whether it's vector or bitmap for each location. So
But
that's a
I wonder what that brings us back to what I was saying earlier about things like the Apple II being out of the price range of most people in the UK or in Europe. That
well,
simply the
yes,
machines in the US are more powerful at the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and the fact that Americans were buying disk drives, and
yeah.
even through
Absolutely.
1984, the English were not. Yeah,
No, that's it. We
Mm.
were stuck to some sort of C45 cassette,
Yeah.
and once it's in memory, that's it. You're not going to load any more information in, are you? Um,
yep,
yeah, yeah. Good shout. That's a good shout. Um, the one interesting thing you were talking about, this being obviously started on the Sinclair QL, and when we were, obviously we were looking at this at the various games produced by Magnetic Scrolls when we were planning for this episode, and you could see the number of platforms they supported per game kind of slowly dwindling as the market thinned out over time.
Yeah.
But this one, starting with Sinclair, I think a lot of people were under the impression that Anita Sinclair, who I think was used as quite heavily in publicity for these games, um, was in some way related to Clive Sinclair, but there was no relation there at all, was there? Um, did anyone notice the kind of Fisher King-esque elements of the Korovnia tale?
Um, I've got to admit, I only skimmed through it. Um,
Don't blame you, quite frankly.
um, I see what direction you're heading in there.
Yeah,
But I mean, to be honest, it was so influenced by the works of others and
yeah,
fairly poorly.
yeah. It felt a little bit like, I mean, without being too rude, it did feel a little bit like Pound Shot Pratchett, or uh,
No, I think that's a good summary.
yes.
With a review, that would be it.
So, I mean, in terms of, I guess we're going to hit the spoiler wall. The non-plagiarized spoiler wall in a moment. But in terms of the sort of the game itself and overall kind of enjoyment levels and all of that sort of stuff, I mean, Jason, I'd go to you. I mean, what
yeah.
if you were going to rate this out of 10? How many thumbs up would you give it?
Ooh. Well, let me say some nice things first before I hit that. Things that I liked, that I was pleasantly surprised by, that I thought were overall pretty well implemented. Uh, for example, I liked that the verb feel was implemented, and usually, if you felt something, it had a quality about it that was sensible to whatever that thing was, whether it was a head, or the but the blue or the red or the green. I wasn't sure why the green was clammy. We'll talk more about the blue, red, and green on the other side, I think. But like that was consistently implemented. It did give the world the kind of depth and flavor that honestly was the kind of thing that both the way Magnetic Scrolls marketed its own games in the moment, in the mid 80s, and the way people talk about them today. That was a thing that made me say, okay, thank you. I'm getting more out of this than I would get out of playing Around the World or another, Scott
Yeah.
Adams type
Yeah.
adventure. I liked that. I liked, although I'm not sure how much it really mattered, but I actually liked that there was the command pronouns where the engine would spit back, here's what I'm currently considering. Where's the list? I had it in my
Oh,
notes
that's
here, but like it would
interesting.
tell you
Very
what it
interesting.
currently thinks he, she, I think he, she, it, and they mean at the time. Like, okay, that's cool.
Oh,
That's a nice
yeah,
That
little
was quite
yeah,
hook
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with
into
that.
the
yeah,
engine. Um, is it a debug command or is it useful for the player? Either way, like I thought that was nice.
yeah,
I
yeah,
thought that the way that the talk, the conversation type uh, system was implemented overall was pretty good. Was pretty flexible. Weirdly, with the merchant, it seemed awfully limited because I could not figure out how to get him.
It was
Oh, I couldn't figure out how
incredibly
to get him
limited,
to
wasn't it?
repeat his inventory list to me. You get it one time, and I'm not sure I figured out how to get it back. What was odd about it was that some of the characters with the most to say, you had a time limit on asking them questions. Like, well, okay, I'll
yeah,
just save the game because I want to see this content. I
yeah.
don't know why you're hiding it from me.
I had a bit of a problem with that. I did find that when I was playing this, I kept on being caught out by the behavior of the characters. And
Mm.
it was very unforgiving. It was very easy to get into a situation where you really couldn't progress, as far as I could tell.
Yeah, but
Once you'd
but
done something silly.
yeah, there were things though that like compare because we all know anybody who's played enough of these games or certainly tried to make any of them. You know that once you get any sort of say, ask, tell
Yeah.
type of thing, and they're like, oh no, this is gonna get bad. I thought that for what it was, for when it was from, that I got what I expected. Modulo things like how come I can't get the shopkeeper to just tell me what he's selling again. So
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
those things I thought worked pretty well. And I'll just set this up on the other hand, and this is where I wanted to say that before I got to the rating. Is I try to approach these games, and I'm going to try to approach these podcasts as I want to judge these games as much as possible on what they're asking to be judged on. And in the case of a fully commercial game, obviously there's that amount of would it have been worth my full price investment at the time the game came out? Am I going to get good play value out of that? In the case of Magnetic Scrolls, their manual, their marketing materials, all the hype that went out around the games really, really hammered heavily on look how great our parser is. You can give these 30-word commands and
Mm,
it'll all make sense. And that's where, unfortunately, as has really borne out for kind of as long as there have been parser based games, there's almost no good excuse, there's almost no good reason, and it's extremely hard to develop puzzles that need a complex sentence to solve because the more kind of verbs and nouns you need juggled up in the air, the problem set expands geometrically. So the manual spends, I think, pages and pages talking about like, oh, look at these things you can do. But really, you mostly only need to combine commands like that if you're doing a walkthrough, if you're retracing your steps because you had to restart the game. And there were a lot of places where I just want to look at a thing, man, and you're gonna
yeah.
make me conjugate that in a more than
Yeah.
2 word manner that I didn't
Absolutely.
need to. And so
Absolutely.
for that reason, for the fact that this game, one of the things I may have remarked to you, Ben, beforehand was
Sure.
I
Sure.
was I was shocked that this game was Magnetic Scrolls' first game because it's so meta.
Yeah.
So much of the humor is meta. This feels like a sixth game where you're
Yeah.
going like, well, we've done this straight. Now let's do it silly.
Yeah.
And so for being that, for for talking up a parser that they could have just said, hey, it's a pretty good parser. Have fun, guys. Instead, they really talked it up. I think I would give the pawn a 6 out of 10, and that's
That's interesting.
probably generous.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, talking about that parser, I mean, it did to me. It felt like a lot of the time it was a case of we've made this basically impossible without a walkthrough by coming up with an incantation of a line that you have to use that's no one's going to even guess. I was repeatedly having to end up going back to walkthroughs because I knew exactly what I wanted to do and I couldn't find the right way to describe it. It turned out to be a very complicated line of text, which presumably was this attempt to come up with a complex parser. I mean, I've got examples here. We can put them after the spoiler wall. But I guess the one thing that did occur to me while we were talking about all of this was I wonder what year do you think Around the World was? Does anyone can
It was
anyone
So
81.
that's 79, isn't it?
No, that was 81.
81.
81,
So
right?
this is 3 years after that, which is
Yeah, so when you look at it
astonishing,
like that, the how quickly things developed.
isn't it? It's absolutely incredible that from that game with that, which was lovely, with a very basic parser, this kind of, three letters and then an object parser, and it came. So in that respect, I mean, it's staggering. It's incredible, the change.
I mean, I'd
Um,
kind of like to sort of cover that a bit later, and maybe do another podcast. That I mean, I think one of the things that really kind of changed things was the game The Hobbit,
yeah,
and that was where we first started to get complicated parsers. And I think from that moment on, everybody was chasing this wall of getting the ultimate parser.
yeah,
Um, and I think certainly from Jason was saying there, he's kind of hit on something with the pawn particularly. There were certain puzzles, and again, don't want to break the spoiler wall, but the puzzle with the plant pot, that was just simply because they wanted to show how good their puzzle was.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
there's no other point to that puzzle.
yeah,
And it achieves nothing.
yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting. You mentioned the Hobbit. I just looked that up actually. So the Hobbit was 82. So
Yeah.
this is amazing. So you've got the likes of Around the World, Hobbit 82, and this is a couple of years later.
Yeah.
It
I do have to play my resident American role here, though, and point out that
Infocom,
The
right?
Hobbit was the first to do that kind of to be that ambitious as a memory resident load.
Yeah,
We're seeing stuff when we grade stuff like Around the World, which it was meant to be memory resident. It was meant to fit into. I don't remember exactly what they were advertising, but probably was going to be able to fit in like a 16K
yeah,
Atari 400 or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah, when you get to Hobbit, now we're talking about it's a single tape load, but it's on, say, a 48K machine,
I think
and
it was
we're going to do all
48K
these.
The Hobbit
yeah,
originally, yeah.
Whereas, like, yeah, Infocom would have been selling games to the disc market, which in 1981 was, for very, very rich, families, that, are all involved in, London finance. But in the U.S., it was a little bit of a bigger market. So
yeah,
I must stand up for
yeah.
the world does not begin with The Hobbit, or I lose my American card. So
No, absolutely. But can you think of a game? I know we're going slightly off topic here, but can you think of a US game that had a comparative parser to The Hobbit?
oh yeah, any of the Infocom games certainly. I mean, you'd have
Do you think
by
of
that
that
point
period?
you'd have so yeah.
Okay.
So Dave, I'm going to need a score from you. Scores on the doors from you. If you want to sort of comment on it beforehand in terms of your your uh, your number of thumbs up. What's your what are you going to judge it on?
Okay, well, I'm going to judge it on how I first perceived the game. When I first saw it back in the day, I was awed by the graphics.
Mm,
I didn't have a problem with them not being at every single location. Um, and I was impressed by the parser, but this is the point that I've got to say that I was developing my own games, so when I was looking at parsers, I was looking at these as a benchmark for where I should be. Um, and at the time, I was very impressed with it. Um, on the replay, um, I found it to be overcomplicated. I found some of the puzzles to. I had to solve some of them from memory because I'd already played it before. But I found myself having to go for walkthroughs more than I probably should have done. So overall, for enjoyment, I'm going to say for nostalgia, 7 out of 10. But I'm going to match Jason with 6 out of 10 for the overall game.
Well, I kind of I'm totally with you on this issue of having to go to walkthroughs. The thing that really caught me out was that I was finding that the actual behavior of the world changes once you get to certain points. So, for
Hmm.
example, and again, this is going to be one past the spoiler wall. Um, you know, I would go to a particular location. I would see something. I would think, right, I'm going to do this. I would search something, and there was nothing there.
Yeah.
And then I would, of course, not think to go and do exactly the same thing later, because how was I to know that object had suddenly changed and suddenly contained a thing later on? And then that was the thing that caught me out. I found there were a lot of, I think I mentioned that earlier, that I found there were quite a number of living death scenarios where it was possible to do something really damned stupid. Um, which realistically were probably pretty stupid, but you could do them and it would just, yeah, you would be stuffed and you could carry on much further into the game and not be able to complete it.
I've
So
got to say there is a there's an instant death thing right at the beginning that really annoyed me, and I don't want to tell you what it is, but it was just so it felt petty.
yeah, yeah,
And I
um,
think you guys probably know what I'm talking about.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think at the time, I think this is one of those games that I mean, it's the beauty of it and the fact that in terms of you know the experience, it was a novel experience. I remember being awed by these games when I played them before, and
Exactly.
I think it was the fact that it's a marked increase in certain technologies that perhaps don't, people always talking about how, well, 16-bit games, they might look prettier, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they've got better gameplay. And I think this is kind of a case of that. It's beautiful. It sells the machines that it's on. Um, do I think it's more than a 6 out of 10? Probably not. As a game, as an adventure game, um, that simple matter of the sheer confusion caused by a complicated parser and this ability to get yourself into situations that were unrecoverable. Um,
There was definitely an overwhelming reliance on complex sentence structure
yeah,
um,
definitely.
that could have been handled a lot easier. I mean, I love the idea of the parser, and I really did. And there's things you can manipulate through it, but it shouldn't have been reliant on that.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, there we are. Okay, so we're now hitting the spoiler wall. Now, for those of you who haven't come here from another adventure gaming podcast, which we've plagiarized this concept from, um, the spoiler wall is here to prevent you from having your games ruined by our overly detailed conversations. So, we're now going to start discussing solutions to problems, maybe little Easter eggs, things that you would otherwise have would otherwise be a little bit less exciting if you already knew about them. So we're going to do that. If you want to play this game, if you want to play the pawn, and you want to have a completely uh, virgin experience going into it, then stop the tape here and come back later. If you're happy to listen to this stuff or you've already played the game, then keep going. We've got lots to say, and we'll get straight into it. So first off, I gave the bowl of rice to Kronos. I don't know why I did that. It didn't make any sense. He thanked me for the bowl of rice, and then I was stuffed, basically.
Yeah, that was a bad one. Where the fact the game actually could be made unplayable,
Yeah,
it was. Actually, I didn't want to say it earlier, but there's certain elements, and this isn't the only game that's responsible for that. But the simple fact that a game that portrays itself as being so sophisticated could be destroyed by a single action is pretty poor.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of other bits and pieces. I think there are. Yeah, we talked earlier about the game sort of being, unable, basically certain things not working and then suddenly working. There's a lot of that. I don't know, Jason, did you come across any of those kind of living death scenarios?
I know that they were there, and I I didn't make that mistake, but yeah, there
That's
are
a pretty
definitely
stupid mistake, right?
some consumable items, and for a game of this vintage, I always say that when we're in the 80s and you're talking about an adventure game like this, the content is the difficulty. In other words, to give somebody those dozens of hours of playtime, even even at this level where, okay, we're going to fill we're going to fill a couple of micro drives or a couple of floppies on an 8-bit platform, to really get that longer playtime. You usually have to throw a fair amount of difficulty at people, and I understand that this is going to happen to us. But what was harder to forgive and to understand, and internally, Dave, at one point you had said it'll be interesting to talk about the different uh, revisions of the game. Now, the version that's up on IF Legends that I played is version 2.3. According to their site, there is a 2.4, and that's the Spectrum Plus 3 version. But so this is the penultimate version.
Right.
And I don't know if you guys spent any time on the horse, but when you are on the horse, items that are on the ground are not visible. So I thought I had ended up in some sort of weird, walking death mode, because suddenly items that I dropped weren't there anymore, and I realized I had to get down off of the horse to
Yes,
see them
I
again.
found that, and it's
And
because obviously from a game point of view, the horse is being treated as a separate room,
yeah, and there
and
were
yeah,
and
that's
John
that is
John
definitely
disappeared too. That was the other thing. Items and Honest John. And this again is where I go to, I'm going to judge this game by the standards that its developers have told me to judge it. And if you're like, oh, parser, we're so great, I'm like, well, you're so great, you forgot that when I'm sitting on your horse, you need to make those objects in the actual
that's
room
not really parser though,
visible.
is it? That's more
It's the engine. I mean,
descriptive.
Yes.
yeah,
But yes, certainly
whether it's a
above,
flag
definitely
in
It's
the
or
the
in the item description, or what, like
hmm.
you're telling me, judge us by how tightly technologically advanced our implementation is, and I'm saying I'm on the horse and I can't see the guy who wants to sell me
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I mean, the other thing, interesting thing about the horse was the number of times I I knew I had to give I mean, obviously Kronos as well. First off, once I got round the incantation of asking Kronos about the wristband, which was um I mean, not necessarily intuitive, but once I'd figured that out, um the the issue I actually had was that I couldn't I think I got to a point. I did something. I don't know what it was, but the chap on the horse completely vanished, and I was unable to find him anywhere. And so I had to restart a couple of times.
hmm.
And
I
I don't know
didn't
whether
find
this is
that, but
just unique to the Spectrum Next version. I was yeah I because I'd come across him to begin with, and then like in the next kind of 2 or 3 playthroughs, I I just couldn't find him.
this is the adventure. You kill the guy and you
That you
put him
have
on
to
the
kill.
horse. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you
Yeah.
have to, yeah, you have to kill him, put him on the horse, and yeah, I just couldn't find him, and I had to restart several times before I could actually run into him.
I didn't
Um,
encounter that in the
did you not
SD
have that?
version.
That's interesting. I do wonder if that's something to do with the next version. But
No, it's interesting.
but but yeah, that
Well,
that was odd, and
can we talk
yeah,
about the wristband a little bit? And actually, I think I wish we talked about this on the other side of the
right.
spoiler wall, because it's so integral to I guess to the plot, and yet I don't feel like the game really earned the sense of dread or whatever that is. Like, I'm a guy wearing a marijuana shirt and jeans, and I have a wristband on, and I'm meant to understand that this is some dire curse, but I don't. I didn't.
Well, it was just it was thematically inconsistent, wasn't it? I mean, you go south from where you start, and there's this red line in the ground and a sign telling you
Yes,
that
you
that's
can't
the end of the
cross.
play
Yeah.
area, and
Yeah.
it's just it's breaking the fourth wall, and you've said this before. We talked about this before the episode started. It breaks the fourth wall in a way that I wasn't expecting at all. I mean, it immediately broke the fourth wall on me, um,
Well,
and
for
jarred
me,
in
that
it totally broke my
sorry, no.
suspension of disbelief.
But for
Um,
me, Ben, that seems to be that they were trying to make a joke of the idea that games were limited.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that was kind of how I always saw that.
Yeah, and I guess that was the problem. I think because of the and we talked about, yeah, we're going around in circles now, aren't we, with the box art and stuff. But it's very much a case of, yeah, the armband to me felt like part of this whole shtick of, it didn't feel like this object of dread that I'd been made a pawn and yada yada yada. It felt like, well, this is just. The fourth wall's been broken. You're telling me that you've got all of these arbitrary limitations on what I'm allowed to do, and the wristband feels like another arbitrary limitation. Doesn't feel like some sort of plot element that's going to kind of make me want to care about the game. And I think that was the problem for me. It was this whole business of constant fourth wall breaking, and a medieval fantasy with a bloke in a marijuana t-shirt, or marijuana shirt. Um, all of that sort of stuff. It made it so sort of funky that I couldn't make any kind of emotional connection to the game, and I like having that.
And this is something that I think I'm going to want to come back to as we play other games like this. But looking back on these games, and this one in particular, because of, yes, not the fact that they go to the the kind of lampshading the limitations of the genre, and yes, you're inside a game and so forth, but that they do it so quickly, and both so
Mm,
quickly in the game, like you say, you can just wander a little bit and see the big end of adventure line. But also so quickly in their own history. This is game one, not game six. I
Mm.
think that for a large chunk of the developers of that era, and again, even going back to the mainframe games of the 70s, it's almost like they were averse to sincerity. That if I don't know, like being
Oh
almost by
yes,
definition
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
biggest nerds that you could imagine, and I mean that affectionately, but you're an enormous nerd if you are making this
yeah.
game or any game like this at that time. But if you just said, all right, it's a fantasy setting in which you have no control over your destiny and all this, and if you just did it sincerely, like, oh, well, people are going to think I'm just a big nerd. So I'm
Well,
going to have to lampshade it at every turn and wink at it, and there's
well,
a lot of games that do this,
but don't you
even
think,
before
Jess?
this.
I mean, when you go right back to like the original Colossal Caves adventure, when it's talking Crowthorne Woods, I mean, even they said they were inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. So the intention at the beginning was obviously to try and be to create something dynamic and dramatic. Um, and I think by nature we were almost taken over by literature at the time. When we come back to talking about Douglas Adams
Yeah.
and I think that's the kind of style that I think, due to the limitations of actual machines over mainframes, we ended up with this kind of comedic approach to things.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for me, the games where they just do a bit of a nod and a wink occasionally, that's quite nice. Because
Mm.
you can go in and there's some, this, that, and the next thing, and maybe where something's just a little bit of a little joke in there. Okay, fair enough. I know I'm playing on a computer, that's fine. But where with this one, I think, and we've said before, it's of its era in a literary sense because of Douglas Adams and Terry
Yes,
Pratchett, and I
I agree with
think
that completely.
I think it may be less the case that, I mean, with the American ones, I think there's maybe a certain approach. Do you know what? I don't know what you think of this, Jason, but I tend to think with the American ones, when I read a lot of those adventure games, this is going to be controversial. I feel a little bit like the Americans. They're um, hmm, how's best to put this? Um, that their commitment to the fantasy genre is less, um, because of American culture, in a way, and the fact that they haven't got this, you haven't got this, the same tradition of maybe I don't know. This is probably grossly unfair. Whereas I think in the case of British text adventures, in actual fact, what's happened is that we had this tradition, and actually people found themselves embarrassed by it, and so they started taking the mickey, and of course it all got a bit too much. It's a little bit like the punk reaction to progressive
Mm.
rock, you know.
I mean,
I
I think
think
you.
this might be an
Sorry,
interesting
Jason.
idea to develop over time. I mean, remember and this is the birthplace. I'm not very far from the birthplace of Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, is not terribly far away from my home, and certainly Zork itself, kind of the big standard bearer for the early fantasy text adventure in the U.S. and then the Enchanter series that's essentially an extension of the Zork universe. It gets pretty jokey at times as well. It kind of flips back and forth. So there the what I'm labeling as the lack of sincerity is I don't think is as much about where the author is as just when. Um, but
Mm.
I think that the who and when and where that might be something interesting for us to track over the next few months as we do more of this.
Yeah,
Mm. I
absolutely.
mean, I will say something. I mean, just you hit on something, Ben, then about talking about the differences between the US and the European and the British markets, um, and particularly with the fantasy elements. I know the US had a real problem with Dungeons and Dragons, and there was a lot of the idea that it was Satan worship and things
Oh
like
yeah,
that, and
yeah.
I wonder what kind of impact that actually had.
So I guess yeah. I mean, with the whole Satanic Panic and everything, and the what were they? The Jack Chick tracts.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, these comics they would hand out that were kind of decrying various elements of kind of rock and roll and D and stuff. Yeah, I guess eventually made it over here, but it was a lot later. And
Oh
I
yeah,
you
and
can
very
understand
dismissed, to be
how.
honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting question actually, whether or not people deliberately made stuff insincere in the US to avoid people. I don't know. Unfortunately, if only we had an American on the show to.
I Yeah, and again, I think that's an interesting angle to consider. I think we also need to remember that the market, even as we enter the 16-bit era, with the Pawn, which kind of straddles because it is available on 8-bit platforms too. But even in there, the market for computer games is still fairly small, and even compared to like because Dungeons and Dragons could in theory be sold at any bookstore, so it kind of had that bigger potential cultural footprint. A lot of these titles weren't being stocked in most bookstores and not in most retailers. So, um, but that's I hadn't considered that as it. But I think it's more about the when than the where. Um,
Mm.
to loop back to the pawn and what it's doing or not doing if I can.
Of course, we went off on a
We
tangent there. Sorry.
that's okay. Um, on the one hand, giving them some credit for having puzzles that had nominally multiple solutions or ways to resolve them, but in certain circumstances, like the fact that you score a different number of points by voting for or against Gringo Bacon Burger, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And the only way that it seems to matter is whether you believe that okay, so the game, the way it sets it up is the ballot box for Gringo is much larger because he's controlling the polling place or whatever.
Yeah.
So we're being rewarded for going along with the electioneering. I don't understand, but the only apparent downside is I have fewer points at the end of the game. I don't care. I I,
Yeah.
I just didn't care.
It's strange,
Uh,
isn't it? It's weird. It's almost like a kind of it's a sort of the creators inserting their kind of political viewpoint and maybe encouraging you to. I don't know. It's odd. Odd.
yeah, and along those lines, because it's tied in with that puzzle, and this goes back to the novella. The
Mm.
one thing that I could maybe say about the novella is that it tried to set up characters that maybe we would encounter in the world and
Yeah.
care about,
Yeah.
and maybe the princess is one of those characters. But if you follow, quote, the main plot line, you can't get to the princess because
Yeah.
you have to use the key on
Yeah.
the stupid ballot puzzle. So the one character
Absolutely.
that you might have an emotional investment in from
Yeah.
the from
Yeah.
the reading of the novella, if you follow the the ideal path, you literally never see her,
Yeah.
and that was ridiculous.
Yeah. Totally. The I mean, in terms of those, we were talking about the kind of weird, kind of world-changing stuff. I mean, the example I was going to go back to was the stump. So
Yes.
I searched it early on because it's right next to the start location in the game. You just go west a bit and you end up there. Nothing in there. Of course, I didn't search it again. And I'm pretty certain if you go, the tree house, if you go up into the tree and enter there with a key and go in, and there's the floorboards, and I tried everything on those bloody floorboards. I'll have to beat that. And
I'm glad he's okay.
and nothing worked. I swear nothing worked. And I later on I had to check the a walkthrough, and it was I'm pretty certain that was to do with when I tried it as well. So it just wouldn't let you move the floorboards. It said that the floorboards were dodgy, and so that's encouraging you to try and move them
It
around.
is, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and I'm pretty certain in order to to prevent you from going down, going down there too early, it basically just wouldn't let you move the floorboards early. So it again it breaks the suspension of disbelief by just kind of making your abilities to do stuff change through the game, and obviously makes it quite difficult to play.
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, and again, I mean, now into the sort of spoiler wall, I want to sort of talk about a little bit about the plant the pot, plant in the pot, plant pot. I can't even say it properly these days. Um, but I mean, that itself is a puzzle. I mean, it was really irrelevant. Scored you a couple of points. But it really was about them showcasing what they thought the parser could do. But the parser itself then is let down when you try to do other things that complicated,
Yeah,
because it seemed to me that it had been just so focused on being able to deliver that puzzle, that it may have been a kind of a hack to ensure that worked.
I would be fascinated to see the code for that, because I
I would too.
genuinely believe that
Yeah.
on some of those they were like, do you know what? We're just going to make it, like you say, a hack. Like we will make it so that the actual incantation, and that's why I keep on using that word, because it is like
Yeah.
that. It's like something from the Greco magical papyri or whatever. You have to use that specific set of words, or it doesn't seem to work. Um, and that it does feel like they've just put it in there to make it look as though the parser is more complicated than it really
Oh
is.
yeah, I mean, what you're talking about here, I mean, you've got a verb, an adverb, and a noun that are all doing the same job,
Yes.
and that itself it's incredibly complicated, but it only works in that situation.
Yeah. And if it did actually turn out that they'd done some incredible programming to make that work, then that's good.
It just doesn't seem to be true. I mean, as a developer, I mean, I've actually got the
Love to
engines
know.
that I've owed IO Icon and Tango Towers and etc. I keep developing it, and I work on various elements of it, and I look at other games from the past and go, can I make that work? Can I do that? And I've got to say that that level of complication is is beyond anything you'd really want to do.
So, I mean, likewise, I mean, uncover the wristband. That stumped me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, couldn't do that.
Yeah, the term uncover.
Yeah. Why would I?
I couldn't get removed to work.
No, remove shirt, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it completely got me. Yeah, likewise, I just took the rice bowl, and then I was like, well, what do I do with this rice bowl? There's nothing I could do with it, so I just tried giving it to Kronos.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he likes rice. Uh,
Yeah. He looks hungry.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's an angry-looking man on a thing. Yeah. So it was a lot of that, and um, yeah, just shine white at shadows, like you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was checked out by that point of the game, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, fair enough.
To go back to the plant and the pot, the
Yeah,
thing that throws me about that, and again, is the kind of the why was nobody sitting next to the writer and saying, this doesn't really make sense, because the plant starts as being described as inside the pot. So
Yes, it
Yes,
does, doesn't
yes,
it?
it
insane
Yeah.
does.
as
Yep,
insane as the whole
yep.
premise of setting up to be this parser exercise, you're telling me that the plant is in the pot. So why do I even think about planting it? You've told me it's there. If you want to
Yeah.
describe it as it's laying on top of the dirt carelessly as though somebody started the work and abandoned it, then I would know. But if you
Yeah.
tell
Or
me
even
it's there,
unplanted
like,
plant.
Well,
yeah,
yeah, it just feels a bit like, there's that story about, was it Sid Barrett from Pink Floyd, and he'd basically he'd been a very naughty boy, and he'd sort of altered his consciousness in various ways, and was becoming more and more erratic, and one day turned up to band practice, um,
Yes.
and he teaches them, um, this thing, and they play it, and he says, "Oh, no, that's not it." um, and then they play it a different way, and he said, and eventually he reveals that the song is called "Have You Got It Yet?" And the whole thing is just a kind of, and it feels a little bit like that. It feels like they're just playing with the player. I mean, and it's almost like they'd been kind of maybe consuming a bit of the thing that this was referring to themselves, and had kind of ended up with this slightly kind of onanistic onanistic joke puzzle. That's what it feels like to
Mm.
me. Almost like
I
they're almost disrespecting the player at that point.
yeah. I'm not sure that's entirely true, but I do feel that uh, that they kind of got a bit ahead of themselves in the beauty of what they were trying to make, and they made that far more important than actually the enjoyment or even the actual ability to play the game.
Yeah, that's probably fairer.
and I've got another note here, and this I think this ties in, I think, with my sincerity remark, and also with my ongoing. I continue to be puzzled by the fact that there were so few just games projects of any sort in the early kind of 70s and 80s period based on Shakespeare, which throws me because it's like the world's best known public domain English language set of properties, and there's almost no content for it. So when I ran into it in the pawn, when we get the porter, and it's got, genuine Macbeth text, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this is interesting. Great. Nice one. Interested to see where you go with this. And so if you, I don't know if either of you did this, if you try to go past him without giving him the whiskey. So he's already been
Yeah,
saying, "Here's a knocking
yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. If a
yeah,
man were porter of Hellgate, he should have old turning the key." On and on. So great. But then if you go past him without paying him, I'm going to read the game text directly. Quote, "You are obviously not going to pay me for my services, so, according to my contract, I'm allowed to kill you." Unquote. As he says this, he smashes you over the head with an empty whiskey bottle, knocking you out cold. He then throws your body into the, quote, "everlasting," unquote, bonfire, killing you immediately. You have died. All right. Like, if you want to just have a puzzle where you didn't do the last piece of the puzzle and so you get killed, that's fine. I accept that as part of the thing. But there are 1,000 different ways to kill somebody with that Shakespearean voice that you've already
yeah,
earned. Why
yeah.
aren't you doing it? Is it because you'd be too much of a Shakespeare nerd to just finish the job? It was it like I didn't do it on purpose. I actually just forgot on a replay to buy him off. But I like it really took
Yeah.
me out of whatever it was they were trying to do.
It's odd. It's odd. It's odd.
Mm.
Yeah, I found the Jerry Lee Lewis thing, faintly
Yeah.
amusing. Um, um,
Another, if I can throw another sort of mechanical engine gripe in here,
yeah,
I like the idea of the exits command, EXITS, which tells you all of the ways
The
to
exits.
get out
Yeah.
of a room,
yeah,
known ways to get out
yeah,
of the room.
yeah,
That's great. However, if you're going to have a command of exit, which defaults to however it defaults to a direction, and that direction can kill you, that's not so fun.
yeah. So,
I
did
don't know
you
if you
did
guys
you
ran
actually
into
manage
that.
to, did that
Oh,
catch you out? Did that
multiple
catch you?
times, yeah, because I was like,
Really?
all right, I'm trying to review,
Oh no!
and
Oh,
just
I
Oh,
didn't
that's
encounter
horrible.
that, but yeah, that's interesting.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
like
nasty.
that's a player convenience that's not so great.
That's not so great, is it? Not great at all. One thing and this is I don't know, is this good or bad? I'm not sure. But at the end, where you sort of you're exposed to the sort of the programmers, I do wonder whether they'd been influenced by Jodorowsky. I don't know if either of you have come across a movie called The Holy Mountain. Um,
I'm not aware of that one.
it's pretty psychedelic. With this character who goes on this great journey, and it's the whole thing is built as this incredibly in-depth, absorbing kind of it draws you right in, and then at the end, when everything's finished, this is a spoiler alert for the Holy Mountain, incidentally. um, uh, they pan out and the camera crew are there, and all of a sudden it completely breaks the fourth wall, and it felt like they were doing the same thing there. And that would have been really effective if they hadn't have done that all the way through anyway. um, but yeah, I mean, as a device, that's incredibly powerful done right, but I don't feel like it was I mean, although it was quite nice giving you the ability to then go back and sort of do whatever you fancied in the game.
Yeah, and I mean, we can look at Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or
True.
maybe more
Yeah.
prosaically and closer to home in the genre. Some versions of Colossal Cave Adventure have a software den, so that tip off,
Yeah,
that
that's true.
there's coding and whatever going on. So, uh, but
Yeah,
yeah,
to be honest,
all
I think
possible
you're right. I think
influences.
the Monty Python is probably closer. I mean, it's interesting to know when that was. When was the Python and the Holy
That's like
Grail?
74.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. It's probably coming
No,
out of that, isn't
the
it?
Holy
Rather than
Grail was later than that, I'd have thought.
75.
78?
75. Goodness me,
75, really?
it's earlier than I thought. Yeah.
Much earlier than I thought.
Hmm.
Wow. That's left us in stunned silence.
So, have we got much more?
I think we've covered everything we really should for
Yeah,
listeners. I
I think so.
hope they've enjoyed it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you what. Let's final. Do we have any final words? It sounds like Dave, you're out. I'm out. Jason.
I wish I'd rated it lower. I got to that Porter thing in my notes and it made me mad about the rating again. So I'm gonna
Jason
retroactively
changes his score.
bump it down to 5. No, because like I said, when they started, I'm like, okay, all right, I'm buying into what you're doing. Okay, let's do this, and they couldn't keep it up even inside the same room, and it just kind of sapped. I found myself sapped of enthusiasm for the game. I also want to point out we didn't really talk about the puzzle in either of the games, but we did manage to have 2 games with rope-based puzzles, both of which had some tricks involved
Oh,
in overcoming them.
oh
I
dear.
had to look for around the world because I'm like, I know what you're trying to make me do, but like, so what? And then I'd like, all right, it's the other time. All right, fine. And
Actually,
the
no, that one
incantation.
that was quite easy for me. I mean, but
Yeah,
I also found that quite fascinating. You should say that because it's the first given the game's age, the simple fact that you actually use one object to do 2 separate tasks was really quite unique.
and
True.
it's a thing that's continued, like the dialogue language that Linus Ackerson came up with a few years ago. His show off for that language is a game that involves the multi-location implementation of a rope. Because he wanted to show
Exactly.
off what he had uncorked for it. But yeah, the manipulation of the rope and the pawn, I'm like, all right, I think I know what you're trying to get me to do here, but if you weren't holding the rope, or you were holding the rope, you died when you climbed it, and they're just
Yeah.
frustrating things about that.
Why don't you just, Jason, accept me giving it a 2 out of 10?
No, because that would be going too far. But yeah, let's see. I just some other things I'd had down here. That trowel. Was there a single object more important in this game than the trowel? Seemed like you needed it for everything from collecting up the
Yeah.
lead to tearing through
Cutting.
wallpaper.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you didn't have that, you were in trouble.
Yeah. And it was very easy to miss, wasn't it? I can't remember if it was. I can't
Well,
was
it's
remember.
on
part of the whole
the
plant pot puzzle. So you may have
it
felt
was
like, all
on
right, well,
the workbench, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was on the work. Yeah,
yeah,
top of the workbench. Yeah, the plant was
Yeah.
underneath. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I do need to pick on the parser for one last thing, and because it was it was a timed single move kind of puzzle, and I would have been very angry if I was dealing with something other than the instantaneous reload times that the browser-based implementation gave me. So you get the potion bottle that you need in order to do in Chronos. You get to the final showdown, you've got the one move, and if you say throw potion at magician, the engine helpfully says the black potion steadfastly refused to be moved. The magician takes one, looks at you, and his face starts to boil, and he goes on and kills you. It's like, you know what? You knew what I meant.
Yeah. But there was, there's plenty of that. That's another example of that sort of, you've got a couple of moments to ask the right thing, or you're stuffed and you have to restart. That's true early in the game. But
So-
at that point in the game, come on.
Can I ask how many points did you guys get in your playthrough? I got 345. I didn't care. And that's I was using all sorts of maps, cheats, hints, spoilers. I was just trying to get through this thing. I got to 345 and it was done. I'm like, I don't care.
I have to be. Go on, sorry, Dave.
280, I think.
I honestly, by the time I got anywhere, I was using the playthrough guide. So I was on 345. I think I didn't bother doing the last. It even told you how to get the other 5, and I couldn't be bothered. So yes, but it got to the point where there were so many magical incantations that were required for things that I unfortunately gave up trying, and relied on the guide in the end.
Well, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've
Yeah,
covered everything, haven't we?
yeah, we certainly have. I think that's it. And well, I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to you guys for making this happen.
Well, thank you. We all made it happen. And Jason, it's great to have you on board with your foreign perspective.
My strange alien
Your
ways.
alien ways.
Your alien ways, yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I guess shall we? When shall we three meet again to use a Shakespeareanism?
Well, I'm hopefully soon. So
Great. Well, we talked about a next game. What we now? I ever since you mentioned it, Dave, I really want to play Planet of Death.
okay.
I have to. I've got to play it. Come on, with a name like that. I feel like I have to always say it like this. I have to say Planet of Death because that's what it's called, right?
Well, I think I mentioned before, Ben, that when I originally played it, it was just called Adventure A.
Oh, really? It's one of those.
Yeah,
God, it really is.
Only came out about.
Fantastic.
I think in the Spectrum version it became Planet of Death, and then it went back to the ZX81 version because there was a crossover between the two. That it started to be called Planet of Death.
Fantastic. Great name.
But it's really probably is my origin and my first introduction to text adventures. So yeah, I'd love to play it again.
Fantastic. Well, I'm up for that as an appetizer. I should think if it's a ZX81 game, we're not gonna make it a main course. But certainly.
I think it was a Spectrum version, so.
Oh, the Spectrum version.
Identical.
Let's give it a go as an appetizer.
Yeah.
And Jason, I think you talked about trying out some of the level 9 games, right?
Yeah, we seem to like the idea of doing Night Orc from level 9. I think that would be an interesting check-in with where that company was around that
Sounds
era.
Good. Sounds good. Right, so next time round, Planet of Death and Night Orc.
You've been listening to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. This episode was produced by Ben Collier, Jason Compton, and Dave Hawkins, with editing by Dave Hawkins.